Hey, did you see Disney's Wish had disability representation?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think on how they handled it?
Okay, my spoiler-free review is that the disability representation was fine. No issues.
Sounds like you have more to say. What's your review with spoilers?
I think what people would find most helpful is if I just shared my own personal observations.
Observations, not criticisms.
Exactly. So I've watched it once, and my take is that for the casual movie-going audience, there is one character that will be obvious as having a disability. That's Dahlia. I think there are a few other characters that could be coded as having a disability.
Coded?
Coded just means it's an element that isn't explicit, but you could infer or interpret it that way.
Ah, got you. But the viewer would have to actively interpret the character as being disabled.
In most cases, yes. So the audience is less likely to actively do that, so it doesn't necessarily count as true disability representation. There's some gray area there. Now, the biggest positive in the way they chose to represent disability in Wish is that the portrayal of Dahlia just shows that disabled people exist.
Is that a big step forward?
Considering the hugely problematic and harmful history of disability representation in Hollywood specifically, yes. They avoid the pitfalls of showing someone having to overcome their disability, or that disability should be pitied, or that disabled people's experiences inspires non-disabled people, or any number of the hundreds of other harmful disability tropes. They just show someone as having a disability and that it's normal. Dahlia uses a mobility aid, and it isn't a big deal. It's treated really no different than if a character had glasses. No one even mentions it.
Yeah, I can see how having disabled people just present in our stories would be important. Are there any drawbacks to this?
It really is a big step forward. Kind of unfortunately that that's a big step forward, but one of the goals that advocates like me are pushing for in terms of representation is to have disabled people be a natural part of the diversity of characters of all stories that are told. Now, when the movie was showing all the townspeople and all their different wishes, I don't remember seeing any of them depicted as having a disability. Maybe I missed one, but if anything, I would have liked to see more disabled people woven into the tapestry of the story, even if they weren't prominent characters. Or better yet, make one of the other main characters have a disability too. Disabled people can be main characters.
So, out of the entire kingdom, they only show one person as having a disability.
You could easily make a case that Bazima also has a disability. What that disability is unclear, whether she's a severe introvert or if she has social anxiety, maybe she's autistic, we don't know. And that doesn't necessarily have to be made clear to the audience, but to most audience goers, I don't think that they would see her as disabled, more of just like a quirky character the way she's written. It would have to be more clear to see her that way, and to do that, they could have just done a touch more explanation, like even a single equitably phrased comment. Or another approach I like is to depict the character dealing with a disabling circumstance.
What do you mean?
Well, in the story of Wish, and again, this is an observation, not a criticism, they chose not to depict any ableism, whether in societal structures or in behaviors and attitudes of individuals towards our disabled characters.
Huh. I mean, I'd kind of like to see a society depicted without ableism.
Right? And especially when that ties into the theme of the story, which it didn't in Wish. And again, that's not a criticism, just a creative choice that they made.
Oh, but if we don't see them struggle against ableism, would we really have an opportunity to empathize with their disabled lived experience?
That's a very fair question. Writers know that audiences connect to characters and empathize because of the struggles that the characters go through. So Dahlia's disability is just a character trait, and the audience doesn't really connect to her experience as a disabled person any more than they might connect to a character who wears glasses. Again, this was a creative choice that isn't problematic. The choice just means we don't connect with her through her disability, and that's fine. But if I did have a criticism, it would be how they wrote virtually all the supporting characters in Wish as lacking any real wants or struggles through which we could root for and connect to them. Yeah, I couldn't really tell you what any of the side characters wanted, independent of moving the plot forward for Asha's wants. Even the king. They hinted at this deep and meaningful backstory that, if explored, would have made him a really cool, complex character, but they never developed that on screen and instead made him a mustache-twirling villain. I don't remember a mustache. Metaphorically. Ah. Now, when you watch Encanto, you know exactly what every single character wants and how their wants are in contrast to Mirabel's wants. You're rooting for every single character because you know what they want and what stands in their way, even when the other characters' wants conflict with each other. And it creates a very satisfying string of events where different characters' wants come into alignment as they overcome their characters' flaws. I couldn't really tell you what any of Asha's friends' flaws were, what they wanted, or more importantly, why. Well, that grumpy guy in Wish, his flaw was pretty obvious. Yeah, but no, they played that off as a character trait, not a flaw that had to be addressed in an arc. So we got a bunch of two-dimensional characters who don't have arcs, whose only purpose is really to move the plot along. So the good news is that usually the characters who are depicted as having disabilities are written two-dimensionally, where their disability is their only defining trait, and all the characters around them have more character development. In Wish, nobody has any character development, so the people with disabilities aren't singled out in that way, which is fantastic. Personally, I see Dahlia's character as the person who makes cookies all the time, not the person who uses a crutch. So that's actually a big win. I would have loved to see a B storyline where a character with a disability had a wish and everybody thought their wish would have been to no longer have their disability, but when they get their wish granted, everyone is surprised that their wish has nothing to do with the disability, and they have no problems with staying disabled. But then that would have needed woven into the overall theme of the story, which, in my opinion, was pretty weak as written anyway. I think Wish was a few rewrites away from being a phenomenal movie, but instead it's merely watchable, kind of forgettable, and now I'm rambling screenwriting stuff, so stop me. So how would you rate Wish on your two scales of disability representation? On my harm scale, where I rate how problematic or harmful a representation is, 0. That's a huge deal. To have disability representation and 0 harm is kind of unheard of. There's a few, but yeah, I don't see any problems or harm that this depiction would cause. Now, in terms of my equitability scale, where I rate how much positive impact a representation could have in moving the needle of public perception and acceptance of disability, there's not very many disabled characters, and it doesn't give us an opportunity to really connect with the disabled character's lived experience, which could change our perceptions of disability. But it is subconsciously getting audiences more and more used to seeing disabled people exist and play important roles in stories. So, yeah, I'll give it a 1.